Hello and a warm welcome to you on this week's edition of Business Africa. I am Afolake Oyinlui. Coming up, Rwanda sticks to its guns on used clothes ban despite US threats to withdraw AGOA benefits. A Gabonese entrepreneur aspires to sell 100% Gabon-made chocolate on the global market. And threat of cobalt shock becomes a top risk for electric vehicles. Rwandan traders have reacted to a move by the government to ban import of used clothing, which they believe would lead to loss of jobs and will have a negative impact on the country's economy. The government increased tariff on imported used clothes with the intention of eventually phasing out importation. Tariffs were hiked from 20 cents to $2.5 per kilogram. Domestic demand for locally produced clothes has been stifled, East African governments say, by the ubiquity of cheap second-hand garments imported from Europe and the US. However, neighboring Kenya, which in 2017 exported nearly $340 million of apparel duty-free from the United States, backed down. Uganda and Tanzania followed Kenya's example and capitulated, agreeing to roll tariffs back to pre-2016 levels, leaving Rwanda, the only East African Community member country, to hold out. Claire Muthunji and Ruth Lago within the story.
A recent ban on the importation of second-hand clothes and increased tariffs on imported used vehicles with the intention of eventually phasing out the importation threatens to have a negative economic setback for many in Rwanda. The Rwandan government argues that the move will boost the country's local manufacturing sector.
Our first goal is to really support those who are in the market, to understand what they need to grow, because we're not just opening up the market for them to do business. We also want to understand how we can make them competitive.
Without the promise of preferential access to the world's largest consumer market, attracting investors willing to build garment factories in Rwanda could prove more difficult.
The relationship between Rwanda and the US is a lot bigger than AGOA. We have a good relationship. We collaborate in matters, whether it's at the UN, peacekeeping, whether it's in what we buy from the US.
However, Rwanda remains only a small garment producer, and clothing shipped to the US represents less than 4% of its total exports. Experts say the immediate economic impact of a partial removal of AGOA benefits would be minor.
We're now being joined by US and International Affairs analyst Calvin Dack from Washington, D.C. Welcome and thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you as well.
Well, first of all, what's your opinion on the fact that East African governments claim domestic demand for locally produced clothes have been stifled by the ubiquity of cheap second-hand garments imported from Europe and the United States?
Well, I think their claim is valid, but I can see both sides. Of course, the priority for East African nations should be to make their domestic production capabilities as strong as possible. However, if you pull the rug out too fast, it hurts those whose livelihoods depend on selling these secondhand clothes. And you create a situation where the domestic industries haven't yet reached the right level of development and capacity. But let's also keep in mind that this debate isn't limited to East Africa, but it's happening all over the world, including here in the United States. We have people that make their living and dedicate their lives to a particular industry, and they believe that the industry could be doing better. The first and easiest place to look is whether or not foreign-produced goods are taking up room on the shelf where domestic, or in the United States case, U.S. products could be.
What long-term impacts would this move have on the Rwandan economy?
Well, I think the best way to understand the impact on Rwanda is to first see where the United States focus should be. The Trump administration should focus on the strategic bigger picture. Because if the U.S.'s economic partnership with Rwanda is only seen as short-term and transactional, then we will all miss out on the potential future benefits to both countries that are possible when both the U.S. and Rwanda have strong and growing economies. Now, the U.S. should also keep in mind that President Kagame and his government are factoring in the bigger picture as well, not just limited to secondhand clothing. Rwanda set a really ambitious goal for trade and investment and economic growth. Now, these trade disputes that we're discussing now with the U.S. might have short-term negative consequences, but that might be necessary for Rwanda to be on a real independent path to be an economic player on the world stage in the future.
U.S. is an economic giant. Does it really have anything to lose if African nations back out of this deal?
Okay, this is the most important thing to keep in mind when you're trying to understand the Trump administration's economic agenda. Economic partnerships with other countries are centered exclusively around Trump's notion of America first. Fair trade with Rwanda or any other country actually means trade on America's terms. Now, it may seem like a relatively small group, SMART, the association that protects the interests of secondhand textile manufacturers, that they're having an outsized impact on US-Rwanda trade, but it actually makes perfect America first sense. That association believes that Rwanda's actions threaten its member companies and their tens of thousands of employees. And if the Trump administration has to pick between a U.S. company and workers and Rwanda or any other country, it will be America first. Now, that said, I do believe that America first, as pursued by Trump, will cause us to lose out in the long run because it stifles the growth of our partnerships. We've already seen that this Trump style of America first, that approach, complicates our relationships with our allies on so many issues, from trade, security and anti-terrorism, and even climate change. So in that sense, I do think the United States could lose out in the long run.
Well, thank you very much for those insights. We're taking a break, and when we come back, you'll discover Gabon's own made chocolate as it makes way into the global market.